Yeah, an American businessman that took a vacation to a small Mexican village, and he'd met a fisherman, all right, and he was sort of like having a bit of a dialogue with him just to find out where he was at, and the pace of his life, as it were, at the time. And he would talk about the things that he liked to do as well as work. And then, so the man who was sort of like well-educated, I believe I'll go into it anyway, from a top university in the States, tried to sort of like give him some steps how he could enjoy what he was doing. And so he was kind of giving him some pointers, and then, as he went along, and trying to give this man some pointers on how to maybe improve his life, he found that it actually arrived at the same juncture he was already at. So it was kind of like going around in circles. Yeah. But I'll just go into the story to make more sense of it, because I don't want to waffle on. You don't want to hear me waffling.
Yeah, we do.
So, no, you don't. Right. Let's start from... Yeah? Right. It's called Fables and Fortune Hunters. An American businessman took a vacation to a small coastal Mexican village on doctor's orders. Unable to sleep after an urgent phone call from the office the first morning, he walked out to the pier to clear his head. A small boat with just one fisherman had docked, and inside the boat were several large yellowfin tuna. The American complimented the Mexican on the quality of his fish. "How long did it take you to catch them?" the American asked. "Only a little while," the Mexican replied in surprisingly good English. "Why don't you stay out longer and catch more fish?" the American then asked. "Well, I have enough to support my family and give a few to friends," the Mexican said as he unloaded them into a basket. "But what do you do with the rest of your time?" The Mexican looked up and smiled. I sleep late, fish a little, play with my children, take a siesta with my wife, Julia, and stroll into the village each evening, where I sip wine and play guitar with my amigos. I have a full and busy life, senor." The American laughed and stood tall. "Sir, I'm a Harvard MBA and can help you. You should spend more time fishing, and with the proceeds buy a bigger boat. In no time, you could buy several boats with the increased haul. Eventually, you would have a fleet of fishing boats." He continued, "Instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you would sell directly to the consumers, eventually opening your own cannery. You would control the product, processing, and distribution. You would need to leave this small coastal fishing village, of course, and move to Mexico City, then to Los Angeles, and eventually New York City, where you would run your expanding enterprise with proper management." The Mexican fisherman asked, "But, senor, how long will all this take?" To which the American replied, 15 to 20 years, 25 tops. But what then, senor?" The American laughed and said, "That's the best part. When the time is right, you would announce an IPO and sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. You would make millions. Millions, senor? Then what? Then you would retire and move to a small coastal fishing village where you would sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take a siesta with your wife, and stroll to the village in the evenings where you could sip wine and play your guitar with your amigos." I'm sorry. But, yeah, it's quite amusing that it's like this was already where the guy was at, and he was somewhat enjoying his life. And I think for me, what I got out of that was the very fact, as well as I hope I was quite comprehensive in my reading. But what I got from that was somebody's trying to introduce him to a lifestyle that he'd already got. And I think he appreciated the essence of his life already, rather than so much the pace that he didn't need, because the pace was comfortable for him, and it still enabled him to do those things that he wanted to with his family. So it's not really offering him anything different. It was exactly the same juncture that he was already at. So I think this is it. It's like, where you are you contented in your life where you're at? I think that's where the question met him, and he was. But I don't know what you think about the story of it.
Yeah, I agree totally with what you said, Curtis, because I like the questions that the man asks.
Yeah.
And then what? And then what? And then what? because all he's recommended him to, because all the guy can see is that it's just a lot of hard work to get back to the same place I'm already at.
Yeah, yeah.
But because I've got all this, because I've got my qualification and I've got my big office and I've got all that, but the geezer's there on doctor's orders because he's suffering.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
so
right.
all that. So again, it's like taking two paths. You're both going to end up at the same place, but one takes an easy route and enjoys it all the way. The other fella takes the hard route, gets richer, but gets a lot more stress and aggravation with it. And at the end of it, has to come back to the place where they started, what they're originally aiming out for. So one's took a very easy path, and the other one's took a very difficult one. Although it looks more successful. But what is success? You know what I mean? That's why I like the questions that the man asks. He's got all of that, and he said, right, get other boats and do this and do that and do the other, and then what? And it's a good question to ask. But then what? What is the purpose of it?
Yeah.
And I think, especially these days, we just rush into something. We've got an idea, right? We're off and running. Before we actually sit down and think, is this going to bring peace to my life? Is it going to bring contentment to me? Is it going to bring happiness to me? Oh, it's all right because I'll have a few more quid in a bigger house and stuff. Okay, fine. But is that still going to, bring the peace that you're seeking for? Because what you're after, you might already have it right at this very moment. But you're saying, oh, if I just had this, if I just had that. And it's what I always say, we're always trying to get someplace else. And that's what, again, coming back to the scriptures, I love it, where Paul says, Colossians chapter 2 and verse 10, and you are complete in him. So therefore you don't need to add anything, you don't need to take anything away, you're already complete. But because, as the media and society dictates, well, you need this, we've got to focus on your image and all that kind of stuff, and so you've got to keep having all these other time-saving gadgets, and technology is great, it's wonderful, but does it really save all the time that they promise? All this, all the fast broadband and everything. Does it really enhance your life? No, not really. You're just stuck in front of a computer more. You know what I mean? And it's I think it takes off the communication. I think between people. I was just walking down the road. When I first started to notice, and I would, walking down the road, someone say good morning, and I almost didn't have time to answer.
Okay.
Just a simple good morning. I'm not going to sit there for half an hour and have a conversation, but just how are you? But all you hear is, yeah, I'm all right. Just walking the other way. And I think to myself, mate, are we just racing and racing and racing and racing? And I just, I don't know, it's just something that just got hold of me, and I just thought, I just cannot keep on doing this all the time. And you still have to check yourself, on a daily basis, because it's very, very easy to sort of slip back on that slope again and just start, before you know it, and then you just start working and working and working, and before you know it, you're back into the same old mode.
Yeah.
You're back into the same old way of doing things, rather than just... It's not saying that you can't do what you're already doing, but you just do it with a different attitude now. You look forward to things, and things just start arriving in your life a lot easier, rather than you just having to stress and strive and all that kind of stuff, which we're so used to.
Yeah. And
everyone telling you that life has got to be difficult, life has got to be hard. If you want to get on, you got to, climb the corporate ladder. You got to tread over everybody else to get there. I thought, nah, let me press the exit button and just get out of here. You know what I mean? Because it's just, it doesn't have to be like that. And that story, I think, that you just read, Curtis, it's the nail right on the head. Because here's a man who's just enjoying life.
Yeah.
Enjoying life, mate. Got every single thing he wants, and it's not about the increase. It's the happiness that he's got. It's the contentment that he has got. And
what kind of man have you got in that equation already?
Yeah, and that's why he kept. And to the person who's already content, and then somebody else has come along and offered him something else, and he said, "Well, then what? Well, then what? Well, then what? Because I've already got what you're talking about. I may not have the money, but I've got more riches than you." You know what I mean? What I've got, you can't pay for it. You know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the gift of God, man. You know what I mean? You just cannot.
But that's what you were saying before, wasn't it? That's what a man has, is to, and it's been given as a gift, is to work and enjoy the fruits of his labour.
That's right.
And if it's children, if it's your family, your wife, your house, all of those things that you still are able to enjoy. That's the central part of it, is the person. Because like you always have said as well, it's all right sort of going along and trying to achieve things, but the question is, you can't, as you go along, number one, who am I becoming, and also in the process, but you can't, achieve that thing and then take yourself out of the equation.
No, you can't.
You have to be a part of it, because it's your vision, it's your thing that you're trying to achieve. So I think that's quite pertinent.
Yeah. And don't we're not against achievement and against making progress and stuff like that, because some people thrive on that, but what it is the enjoyment of it. If you enjoy that, because some people say, I just need a challenge, then they get on to their next job or whatever, and then before you know it, 2 months later they would need another challenge. That's an indicator to sort of say, no, there's something wrong here. Because if you was enjoying it, you'd see yourself right through the hard time. And that's the key to it. What we're talking about is the enjoyment of what you do. If you're not enjoying it, that's when the stress comes. And people say, there's so much stress in the world, but there's really no all the stress is in here. It's just really, I think it's self-induced, because I've said before, if I was to give you a tenner, Curtis, and say, right, go down the road and get me a bag of stress, you're going to be a long, long time, mate. Because it's something that you can't purchase.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
It's another gift, but we're giving ourselves the wrong gift. So we're inviting it in.
Oh dear.
And and so that's what we want to do, is invite the gift of God, not invite the gift of stress. We don't need that, but it's just simply because of the way that we're viewing our circumstances in our life, and we've all come through different things. Why is it you see some people go through exactly the same problem? And one goes through it and they get stronger, and another one falls flat in their face, and they've got the story of, this is what I used to be, and because you can learn from successes and failures. And I think Jesus said the same thing at the end of Matthew chapter 7. He talked about a wise man and a foolish man. He said, if you hear my words and don't do them, he said, you're like that man who builds his house on sand. He said, and then the wind and the rain, or really the problems of life come, and it hit upon that house, and it went flat down. And he said, and great was the fall of that house. Whereas the other person who heard his words put it into practice, and the same conditions came, same wind, same rain. So it was the same problems that people went through, but because they had put something down, which is the word of God, which is what Jesus says to build your life upon. He said, then when the problems came, it stood, because now you're a person now who's got a totally different perspective about things. So when people are coming along saying, the economy's bad, or this ain't going to work out, you've got something else going on the inside. So you've got a big old grin on your face, even though you're going through exactly the same situation as everybody else, because you've submitted yourself to something greater. You're not looking at all the circumstances. So you're still making progress, but rather than you having to chase after it, it is now appearing very gently and beautifully in your life. And going back to the scripture, it is pleasant. All her ways are pleasantness, and all the ways are of peace, because now God has now seen that you're trusted in him, and those things start to flow your way without all the aggravation and all the effort that everybody says that you have to do. I mean, even in the universities and that, the amount that you have to study, the lottery load of information that you got to do it to get your qualification, then you ain't guaranteed a job, whereas you were a year ago. But this kind of education, the way of peace, the way of righteousness, the way of contentment, pays big time, because then it gives you, like it's done for you, in your job now, because you're using that. So you're not just using your physical qualification, but you're using your spiritual qualifications, which is now made room for you. As he says, a man's gift will make room for him and bring him before great men. And I think it's it's wonderful what God gives. And
I think it's just something you said before, is to rewind a little bit, but it's still in the same vicinity. I think there was a quote from Socrates, something I was reading in the week. But anyway, there was a quote from Socrates that said, the unexamined life is not one worth living.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think someone took it further. I think it was Paul in Romans 12:1. And he said, I I urge you, I plead with you, brothers, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God. But then he went on to the next verse and he said, and be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. The renewing of your mind. And I'll be honest, I was talking to somebody as well who's a believer, and I said, you know what, in this job you have to be so alert and careful and look after yourself, because while you're dealing with a building full of people who have their own sort of difficulties in the mind, you trying to look out for them, sometimes they can cause you so much, okay, not that word again, but some strain, some emotional pressure and stress, that you really do have to keep tabs on yourself, because some people have just sort of like, even been in that industry, have gone way over. I mean, you were talking about the studying, and somebody who I work with now, who's on our level, and she's like a support worker. I was told at one stage she qualified as a, what we call the Band 5 nurse. And the thing was, she'd done all of her training and she'd gotten to the third year, so she was fully qualified. And I don't know how long it took, but the moment she got her first role as a nurse, I think she was off sick. And that was just because of the strain of it. I think it got to a point where she just hit a wall emotionally, and it was like she realised the enormity of the task, but then also the strain of the training, I think, took its toll. So it kind of caught up with her. And I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, but you know, I've touched university. I mean, touched, and you know, within less than 3 months, and I looked at the way and I thought, if I can't even cope at this pace after 3 months, I thought to myself, I don't know if this is me. And I'm looking at all these people and they're gathering this, they're doing that, and I just felt like, I think I said to your mum last week, you could be in a whole room of people and you still feel like you're all alone. And it's just, that's kind of how I felt. I felt like an island. I felt like I was the only person who was maybe feeling the slight pressure of, you know, the studying, etc. And I had to make a decision, because I ended up speaking to the tutor. So, you know, I think that's what it comes down to as well, is being able to, you know your own limitation, but then also check yourself, like you said. It's examining yourself. It's sort of like checking your own mind.
A little friend on it.
And, oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a nasty bug going around. So, yeah, I think that's where I am at as a person, not just at work, but generally in my life. I'm having to, and this is a daily thing, like Paul explained, is just sort of like examining my life, my response to things in life. Because life isn't, you know, always it's gonna chuck some things at you, sometimes unexpected. And it's sort of like, not so much as somebody said what happens to you, but how you respond to it. I think that's what it sort of comes down to. So that's sort of like a mind thing. It's like, what's going on up here? So something out here may have changed, but do I have to change as a result of it? Does that thing that's maybe been stressful have to stress me out? Does that thing that's almost an angry atmosphere have to make me angry? It's kind of, you know, things like that. And I think the other thing I found was having a conversation with somebody this week, and they were saying, you know, happiness comes from within. It's not circumstantial.
That's right.
It's not because, like you said, you know, the broadband, there's so many different parts of technology now, and I can't even keep up with all of it, to be honest. But it's like, I don't have an iPhone, or I don't have this, like, even my mum, I know, even my mum's more up to date with technology than me, and I'm embarrassed, actually. But it's like, you know, it's like the acquisition of all of these things, and it's like, whoa, you know, when does it stop? When do you become a person that says, you know what, I'm going at this pace, this is good for me? I think you gave an example again about, were you driving in a car and there was somebody who wanted to get past you? Do you remember the story?
Oh, yeah, it happens every day, yeah.
Yeah, and this particular person was not a Rolls Royce, Bentley. But a nice car, yeah.
Bentley, yeah.
Beep, and he's trying.
They weren't pipping their own, but they were
you
trying.
See a discontentment
it was just
in
out,
their face.
Out by Sandon Park that way, just out in the sticks.
Yeah.
And I was just driving along, minding my own business, not driving slow, or I don't think so anyway. Just trying to keep up with the speed of the road, and it was a Bentley Continental GT, nice car, you know. And it was seconds when it was right on my bumper, and the woman in the car was, bobbing and weaving, trying to get past and stuff like that. And I looked at her face and I thought, obviously she worked hard to get a car like that. But yet you could see by the frustration in her face that she certainly wasn't enjoying it. And I said a prayer at that time, and I said, Lord, when is enough enough? When do you arrive at the place to say, peace, And because then, all right, she might have had an emergency or an appointment to get to. But even so, it's to have all that, but still not be in a position to enjoy it. So that's a classic example of you got something, materially, but there's nothing spiritually on the inside. There's something missing. But just going back to what you were saying, Curtis, about when you was at university and you was in it for 3 months, and then you said, you know what, this isn't for me. And I think that's an important point, because it's all right to do that, because so many are pressured into say, well, if you haven't finished it, there must be something wrong with you, bruv. Because again, you're sort of saying, right. You're not up to date with the technology or whatever. But see, if you're not going down this road that everybody else is, so you're not. There's a lovely quote by Mark Twain, and he says that when you find yourself on the side of the majority, he said it is time to pause and reflect. And everybody said amen, because it's true, because it can just drive you crackers if you just do what everybody else does, and that's fine if people want to do that, but it doesn't mean to say that I have got to be included in it. And I think we have trouble these days with certain maverick types of people who just want to get off the beaten track and just say, look, I find I'm being pulled in this direction. I remember you saying years back when you was studying, doing your artwork and stuff like that, and the teacher or your tutor was on your case. But it turned out that as we sat and talked in that he probably didn't enjoy the job that he was in. That's why if you don't enjoy something, you can't communicate properly.
That's right, yeah.
If you, it doesn't matter how qualified you are in it, if you don't love what you do, you'll think, okay, yeah, do this, do that, because you know how to do it, but you as a student didn't. And so therefore you couldn't pick up on it. So although he's called a teacher or a tutor, he's not communicating with you because he's got something else on his mind, because he wasn't enjoying the job. So again, it's like trying to get somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm on the move. I need to get out of this place. So when you're there and you're not at peace, you can't contribute to someone's life better. So I think it's a noble thing that you've done to say, look, you know what? I can see everybody else is doing this, and okay, it might work for them, and they're just trying to push on, but it's not for me. And to sort of just turn the engine off or push the eject button, or people call it, a retreat. It's not retreating. You're just advancing in a different direction. You know what I mean? So it's not going backwards. You're just now cutting off the points that are going to waste your time. Yeah. Because if you go down that road and it's not for you, you can just. I was at the hospital the other day with Mum, and we was looking for a department where it was, and we went up one place and the door was shut. And he says, you got access to this certain department, which is where we didn't want to go, but you haven't got access to the rest of the hospital. And we went up the other side of the hospital, went into another room, and then a sign above said exactly where we want to go. And I said to Mum, do you see that? I said, sometimes that's how the Lord speaks to you, One place is cut off, and if you spent so much time trying to push down that road, saying, well, I need to get through here, you waste your time, because you've now come off the path. And now if you just leave that alone and go to the next exit, what we do, it's just like you're being directed. Sometimes these doors are shut in our life because it's not the right way to go down. But because we keep wanting to go down there, or because of popular opinion, because, everybody else is doing it, it doesn't mean it's for you as well. You know what I mean? And I think it's a great lesson there for you to sort of say, you know what, I need to come off. And I'm glad, because you found your niche where you are now, haven't you? I think you do. I think it fits you like a glove. Yeah.
Yeah, there's...
'Cause you've always been sort of tuned into that way, into listening to people and stuff like that. Because we've known each other since... Well, Curtis was like knee-height or grasshopper, you know what I mean?
Not far from there now.
But it's... that goes to show that when you're being taken down a path, not everybody will agree with it, Not everybody will sort of say, well, or recommend it, but you've got to know in yourself. And therefore you got and as you go down that path, I think you find other people, like in the field that you are now, who've been a great encouragement to you. So because you got off that other path and went on the right one, you found the right people, which has helped you along the way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's I was going to say, it's quite interesting, to be honest with you. I said I like this job, and it's nice to kind of be in an area where you can do your best,
where
to
you enjoy, where
you can help people, etc. Right. It's a privilege, and I think in terms of that tutor on that art course, if I must be honest, I think there was a lot going on there, but it was like whenever I needed help, sincerely, it's like he didn't have time. And even when he was there, he was a bit sort of agitated, like, I've got somewhere else to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think I said something like that a few weeks ago, and this is the thing, is that we sometimes do carry on in life like the Mad Hatter. We don't sort of stop. You've got Alice who's kind of lost direction, and she's looking for direction. But you've got this man who's just trying to get somewhere else. I can't be asked to help you. I'm on my own path. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think in the process sometimes,
you got to serve.
Yeah. So
that is the whole purpose of. But you can't be a teacher and want to do your own thing.
No,
it's not that kind of profession. You've got to be there for other people. Otherwise, what are you in it for? And sometimes we can, again, because of pressure and maybe of lifestyle or background, family ties, whatever.
That's got a lot
you're pushed into a profession that you really don't want to be, but because you're frightened to speak up and say, well, you know what, this isn't really me, you end up later on in life not enjoying what you're doing, and so therefore it doesn't help you or the person that you're so-called trying to teach, because you've got the label of a teacher, but you're something else.
I think there's a story that you've reminded me of quickly, and those of you who kind of know the story of Moses. He got to a certain junction, and even there's so much to draw out of that story in his life. Areas where it had gotten to a point where it's like, this area is now closed, Mr. Moses, as it were. But he was sort of like instructed just before he was told he was about to die, that he was instructed to go up to a mountain range, and he'd spent so many years taking all of these people out of slavery, out of a oppressive situation. Now he gets to a point where he's not allowed to cross over. He can't go and enjoy this. So now you've got a man of his age standing up, this great leader who's found his stop now, gets to only look at the landscape of what he could have maybe brought the people into, or just looking at what the other people would enjoy. But yet that was his stop, and he couldn't go any further. And I thought to myself, do you know what? A few years ago, I thought, this is something that I've had to kind of look at and think, I don't want to be one of these people who look back when I'm sort of like however old and just think, you know what, look at what I could have had, and yet don't sort of maximize on it now. And it's still a daily task, and I'll be honest, I'm still trying to find me, and that's part of a journey, is finding me, finding myself, as it were. And I think in part of that process, it's kind of been able to think and say, well, you know what, here's where I'd like to be, but what am I doing to make steps towards that, to make that a reality? Because, as I said, it's not something that I want to look back. Well, I said to somebody the other day, what would I tell the grandchildren? Sitting them on my knee, and then they're talking and asking questions about my life, and it's like, well, and kids are very clever. Well, Granddad, how come you didn't do that thing that you? Oh, well, kids, it was. And as I said, kids aren't stupid, and it's like they will ask questions. But even in myself, it was a thing where I just thought, you know what? I want to be able to, if it comes to that scenario, be able to sit them down and say, you know what, this is something that I would have, that I liked to achieve, and this is how I did it. This is where I was, even the pitfalls, the whole process, warts and all, as somebody said, Oliver Cromwell said about his photo being taken, don't sort of, warts and all, it's all there. But it's part of as you're going on the journey, it's about the successes, it's about the failures, it's about the walls that you hit, along the way. You can't leave the not so pretty parts of the story out just to give it to, because it's not really a true account of it anyway. So you need to give somebody the whole, the whole truth. Yeah, so, it's definitely something that I think is important, to be able to examine things and look and say, you know what, do I want to be that person on that mountain looking over my life saying, you know what, looking at something I could have had but can no longer have it? I don't want that to be me.
That's a really good point as well. And I think the way that we do find our way is certainly by coming back to God, because I often use the scripture about Jeremiah chapter 1 where, you know, God says to him, you know, before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. Yeah. And I think that's what it is it's like realigning ourselves or reconnecting back to the source that brought us here in the first place, which is what God's done for us. When you start that, then I think the path starts to get a little bit clearer. And then you find, you know, because God, if God can, you know, bring us here, he knows what family we're going to be born into, he knows our nationality, he knows our personality, you know, how tall we're going to be, you know, what we're going to weigh, everything about us. So surely, if all that is there, surely the career, the, you know, the path we're going to take in life, whether we get married or not, and have a family or whatever, you know, all that's already there. And, you know, to say things like, you know, before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. Yeah. And I think it's connecting back to that knowledge of God, getting back to our Father, who has got all that knowledge. So therefore it starts to open up now and unravel before us. And that's why Jesus says, you know, narrow is the way that leads to eternal life. So we can't take everybody's opinion, but we just need to take God's opinion, and it will just open up in front of us rather than us trying to strive after it. If you've ever asked yourself, you know, what's the purpose of life? And I think that is the purpose. We are returning back to what God originally intended for us, and he's trying to get our attention. The Bible does say that the Lord himself shall give us a sign, that a virgin shall conceive and bring forth a son, and you should call his name Jesus, as the angel Gabriel said to Mary, you know. And it's that's what it is. God is trying to get our attention, and that's what it talks about wisdom as well. If you read in the book of Proverbs, it says that wisdom and voice is crying out. It's crying out to the simple, you know, come and listen, for my words are right. You know, don't be foolish anymore. Come and listen to what I've got to say. And that's what God is doing. So, as I say, sometimes because we're getting distracted with other things, but I think it's an excellent point that Curtis has just made there. You know, just finding out exactly, you know, where we are called to be. And it's lovely as well when you start to realise that, and you think, wow, God has actually got a plan for my life. Yes. So none of us is a waste of time. No one is here by accident. So we're in about the last quarter of an hour of the show.